This is this next video we're going to show you is part 2 of our restringing video, and showing you the process of taking the strings off, making sure you take good record and measurements of the strings so that you know what to do when you go to put it back together. Like I mentioned in the first video, the introduction video for restringing, you're going to have to take good measurements of the strings and what sizes they are, because as you look at the strings, you might look and say, oh, well, they look the same size, but there's actually probably, I don't remember exactly how many different sizes in this one, but on the average a piano will have about 10 different sizes of treble wire, plus the bass strings. Okay, bass strings, those have to be custom made by the bass string maker, but you want to take good measurements, and as you take the we'll get to the bass strings in a second, but the first thing you want to do is have some kind of a system to keep track and chart your sizes and other different information. I actually made a chart here that shows that I made up, and I'm going to put this on our website at howardpianoindustries.com, so you can get a copy of this if you want to use it for making your records. But we can see that I've got up here, it shows the piano, the number of single wound bass strings, the number of double wound bass strings. Those are these items up here. I wrote up here the size of the tuning pins that I took out, so I can determine the same length, and then of course determine what diameter I want the new tuning pins to be. I wrote up here the number of triple wound bass strings for this piano, and then I put for the bass strings, you're not going to have a lot of information because you're going to be sending those in for duplication. But once you get to the treble strings, then you're going to want to start to put the diameter, and you're going to want to have a good micrometer to measure each individual bass string, so that you can start to make notes of what size. Some of the other notes that I put, some strings are tied, but most of them are going to be wrapped around. But I'm putting notes like third string tied, and I'll show you in a minute what that exactly means. But as you can see on here, when you've got a string, it starts at the tuning pin, comes up to runs over the bridge, wraps around a hitch pin, and then comes down to the next tuning pin. Okay, that's all one piece of wire. But and that's how most of the treble strings are. But you've also got some that are tied. Let's see if I've got any in this piano at all. I don't believe this piano does, but some of them, if it's an odd number of strings, they'll be tied at the end. Like sometimes the first string on high C will be tied, and it just means that there has to be a loop made at the end, and we've got a video showing how to make a loop on a string for that purpose. I did have one piano that I restrung that every single treble note had a hitch pin, and so we had to make a loop for each one of those strings, which took more time and more effort, but that was what it was. So that's what we did on that piano. But when you start to remove the strings, you want to be careful not to just start at the top and take one string off at a time until you get to the bottom. Because there's so much pressure from the strings on the plate, you want to do it evenly. So you might loosen all the bottom tuning pins for each string to start to destabilize the pressure of the weight of the strings on the plate. And you might do that on the whole piano, and then maybe do all the top strings, and then go back and through and do the middle strings, just to loosen the tension on them, so you're kind of evening as the tension comes off, so you don't have it all coming off all at one section at one time, and then leaving the rest of the piano all up under tension. So you can equalize the tension that way as you start to loosen it. And then once you've got the pins or all the tension off the when you go to loosen the tension on the strings, the tool I find to be the easiest is this Ratchet star head, which is this piece right here. It's got the star bit on the end to fit over the tuning pins, the same as you'd have on a tuning hammer. I wouldn't recommend just using a regular 1/4-inch socket because it won't work very well on the tuning pins in most cases. But you take this and you put it on the pin, and then I would take it one time around to loosen or take the tension off. Okay, if you do one full rotation on the like this, that'll take almost of the tension off the string. Okay, so I would do that on again, one string for each note, and then go back and do another string for each note, and then do the third string. So that'll equalize the tension coming off. So once you got them loosened, then what you'll start to do is take the string off of one, or what you can do is, once it's loosened enough, and you might have to loosen it a little bit more to be able to get access to it, is just snip the wire. Okay, once you've got the wire taken off, again, you're going to measure it. Okay, and I usually start measuring at the top end and then measure each, and you only have to measure one string for every note, because all 3 strings of each note are going to be the same diameter. Now, it's pretty much the same as on a grand piano as it is an upright piano. This is obviously a grand piano. Usually you've got the lid off when you're doing it. But if it's an upright piano, you're going to want to lay the piano on its back. We sell a piano tilter, or you can make some kind of a stand or something, or you can lay it down on the floor. It's just a little bit harder to work with if it's down on the floor. That's the tool that I usually use. So once you've got the strings off, and again clipped them off, and take measurements and made a chart of the size for each individual note, then you know what size wire you're going to go to replace it with when you start to go to put the strings on. Then the next job is to take the tuning pins out. Got another tool. You can use this Ratchet star head, but that's a lot of threads so that'll take you a long time. So I like to use this power tuning pin socket. There it is. It's got the star tip on the end, and this is made to go into a drill with a reverse function, so it's got to be reversible drill, so that you can use that for removing the tuning pins. So you just put it on there, you've got your drill here, and then pull it out in reverse mode, and it's much faster than using this tool for removing the tuning pins. I mean, you can do all of it with a tuning hammer if you got one of those, but that's a lot more work and a lot more difficult method. It's going to take you a lot longer. So those are a couple tools that are good. So again, once you've got your pins out, then you're going to, of course, take measurements of several of the pins to determine what size you've got, so you can have a starting point for replacing the pins and know what size pins you're going to go into. Then when you get to the bass strings, taking those off, you want to make sure, because you're going to be sending these in for duplication, that you keep them in order. What I'll do is I'll take just a cord or a wire or something to string them onto, and as you take them off, you do the same thing. You would remove them and clip them off of the tuning pin, and then you take the loop and loop that onto the wire, okay, and put them in order. If there are any strings that are missing that you don't have, the string maker needs to know that. So put you can put a punching or a piece of paper or something that in there indicating that there's a missing string, and in the notes that you send with the bass strings, when you send them in for duplication, you want to indicate how many single string notes there are, which means the strings that are just one string per note, how many double strings there are, which is the notes that have 2 strings per note, and of course if there are any triple string bass notes, notes that have 3 bass strings per note, okay, because you're going to be sending those in, and they need to know how many there are. So that's some information that you need to include with the bass strings when you send them in for duplication. But you know, once you've got the strings off and the bass strings, you know, grouped together and ready to send off to the bass string maker, you know, then you can kind of evaluate the soundboard and, you know, other things. And if you're going to take the plate out, just determine. And the nice thing about taking the plate out, then you can paint it. I mean, you can paint it without taking it out, but it's more difficult because you got to make sure you tape everything off, and so that can be done. But if you take the plate out, then you can see underneath it to see if there's any cracks that need to be addressed when you get to that point. So that's the next step in the video. Just continue to watch as we have more information in the next couple videos for you.